All right, everyone, we're still getting everyone into the room and we will get started shortly. Welcome, everyone. We're just getting a few last people into the room and Kimberly will come online and we will kick things off. So
hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hold on. Okay, hi. This is Kimberly Shepu with the AFA International Office. Lisa, are you on here as well?
I am, and I will get started with introductions as soon as we flip to that first slide.
All right, it should be on there. Is it on there?
I just have there we go.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the slideshow wasn't up. Okay. Sorry, I was talking, but I guess I was on mute on my computer. But anyway, we're good.
Well, we're super excited to have all of you with us today. And I want to just let you know that most of the MEC is on the call today. We've got Kirk and Joelle, myself, and Todd is out flying. Amy is on with us. Tanya, as part of the negotiations committee, is on with us. And then we have all of you as members. We also have a couple of guest speakers with us today. So Kimberly's going to be hosting the call with me. Kimberly is our staff attorney, and she worked with us the entire time we were working on the TA. And our two guest speakers today, we're going to start with Dan Akins. And Dan is an economist in the aviation industry. He's been working in this industry for over 30 years. And he's provided valuable input and support to commercial airlines and labor groups in the economist arena. We also have Joe Burns with us, who is in charge of the staff attorneys, for lack of a better way to say that. And he was actually a union president in the healthcare industry and has been with AFA for the last 7 years, I believe. So we've got two really wonderful experts to talk with you about some pieces of the TA and give you some background and history on where we are today and where we've come from. And then we'll get started on the actual changes to the contract and enhancements, all of those good things after that. So Kimberly, I'll let you talk for just a second and then we'll go in with Dan.
Okay, Lisa, can you go ahead? There's some people in the waiting room, but I can't add them while my screen is sharing. So can you?
I will add them while you check.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I want to start out saying this is all new to us with a virtual roadshow. So if there are any glitches in the Zoom, I'll take responsibility for that, but please be patient because we're all kind of learning this as we go along. So thank you for your patience, and we're hoping this will work. This will also, it's being recorded and it will be posted on our website, so you can refer back to it, or if anyone is not able to be here, they'll be able to watch it, and so good. Okay, so I want to just kind of back up to where we got where we are. I know that any of you who were here 3 or 4 years ago remembers Commit to Compete, which is when they came in and told us basically that someone's on video. What is that? The video should be off. Sorry, guys. Okay, so they said that when Alaska Air Group told us that we were going to have to, quote unquote, earn the Embraers by committing to compete, i.e. committing to compete who can make the most concessions. And obviously the company, Ed, why are you on video? Turn off there. And we obviously reached an agreement at that point that, had some good and some bad, but we've lived with it. Here we are today. We were excited to go back into negotiations with the hope of getting a better contract. The company obviously had different ideas. And after Commit to Compete came up, we had the whole pilot shortage where all our flying went to somewhere in a handbasket. We feel like the company made a lot of promises they didn't keep. And at the same time, the company was earning more and more money, which made us even more uncomfortable with the situation. If you guys have your video on, can you turn that off? It's kind of distracting. Ed Hawes. Okay, so we started negotiations just over a year ago, and based on the survey and all our feedback and our listening tours, we know that the things you wanted were higher wages and per diem, increased scheduling flexibility, and then the company wanted a lot of productivity gains. And we're like, well, we all want to be productive too. We'd like to work as little as possible for as much money. But if we're going to save you productivity and save you money on that end, we expect to be paid back for that. Horizon wanted to keep their costs down because they are now under capacity purchase agreements, which sets a rate for flying, and so they're kind of capped by that amount. There's some questions about how much they really are capped, since any profit goes back to Air Group, but that was the position they were taking, and that they were not going to make costs any greater than anything that they would have to bid for flying higher than SkyWest. And that they didn't want to give us any benefits that other work groups didn't enjoy, although obviously other work groups enjoy some things that we do not. So after a year of negotiations, going to January 2020, we were very close on a lot of the issues in the contract, except wages, per diem, and health insurance, which are always the big three at the end. And the company dug in its heels. They had a bunch of different scenarios of ways they could spread out the same pot of money and let us pick our poison and so forth. And we finally came to an agreement sort of in February, when we started to realize that coronavirus was coming up. Nobody at that time, I think, well, I don't want to get into political, really knew how much that was going to hit us, obviously, but it was starting to come out kind of in the background. And so we came to an agreement on the wages. Now in March, obviously coronavirus hit, especially in Seattle, was the first epicenter in the United States. Our schools and our stay-home orders were issued. All the non-essential businesses closed. This is the world we live in now. And at that point, we agreed on the final issues and began pulling the TA together. And then in April, which is now, the company had been very adamant that they were not going to renege on any items in the TA, but where they started pushing back on us was when it would go into effect and when it would be implemented and on what terms. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but just know that that's the background here. And while all that is going on, Air Group is cutting their schedule by 80%. Horizon and Alaska are offering leaves, but 16 million people file for unemployment, and that's kind of the situation we found ourselves in through absolutely no fault of our own. So I'm going to let Dan Aikens. Dan is aviation economist, and I think Lisa went over a little bit. I'm not sure everything she said because I think my phone or my computer was on mute for a minute there. So I'm going to let Dan take over and talk about that. Dan, I need to unmute you first, so hold on there a minute. Okay, Dan, you should be able to talk.
Yeah, let me see. Can you hear me?
Yep.
You hear me now? Yeah. Okay. I guess good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us. As was told earlier, I'm an aviation economist. My background, I've worked with various labor groups for the past 35 years, including Alaska and Horizon flight attendants. I've worked with AFA. My main job is to evaluate the costs and benefits in a monetary sense for contracts that are negotiated by unions on behalf of members. I've worked with United on their last contract, Hawaiian on their recent TA ratification. In previous lives, I've worked on U.S. Airways, Northwest, AmeriQuest. I'm currently working with American and Southwest flight attendants on their Section 6. The problem is, as my first slide will show, we're in this uncharted territory. If you can go to the next slide, where pretty much all Section 6 negotiations have halted, largely due to what everybody realizes is probably the worst economic and airline crisis that we've had in generations. And unlike other events, the pandemic produced almost an instant global economic recession. And anytime there's a problem with the world in terms of diseases or economics or war or fuel prices, we tend to get hit immediately and the most hard. And in this case, it was no exception. As those of you who have been flying the line know, the industry is sitting between 5 and 10% load factors when the break-even numbers to make money are up in the 60 to 70%. So we're well off anything that was planned for, and it came up immediately, and we've been hit the hardest as an industry. I didn't believe this when I first saw it, but I've looked at the impacts of 9/11 and 2008 and the financial meltdown and the airline industry's impacts. And the impacts of those two events combined don't equal half of what we're facing today. 9/11, we lost about 18% of our capacity, and 2008, we lost about 12%. So we're looking at carriers losing 80, 70% of their capacity, the demand for that capacity, because of the coronavirus. The TSA yesterday announced that it had the lowest throughput it's ever had in the history of the TSA, 96% down from last year in terms of passenger checks. Over 100 global airlines around the world have stopped flying altogether. So they've parked all their planes and either are laying off people or having their employees idled and not active. Alaska, like United, like American, like Southwest, is reducing dramatically their operations, which obviously affects Horizon's operations. I believe that Alaska's reduction for 80% reductions is temporary until the market comes back. But right now we're looking at pretty dramatic reductions in operations across the industry. And Alaska kind of fits the spot where most carriers are aiming about 80% reductions in the near term. The basic problem right now that creates is that we've got too many workers and not enough work. So that means there's not enough hours on the system to support the level of employment that we've got across the industry and not just at Alaska and Horizon. If you go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying. It's not going. There we go.
I know. I just want to make sure you can hear me. So one of the saving graces that we have in this round of crises in the airline business, unlike what happened after 9/11 and the financial meltdown in 2008, is that there's a legislative agreement to provide money to support airline employees, which is called the CARES Act, as part of this gigantic $2.2 trillion legislation that just passed Congress a couple weeks ago. As of today, and I guess last night, Alaska Air Group, which includes Alaska and Horizon, have been approved for about $1 billion in grants. The airlines are already claiming that that's not enough. It's designed to get us through the next 6 months. But right now, we can't give Alaska and Horizon any more concessions than the full payroll that is being supported by the federal government. So we should be in good shape for the next 6 months. One of the provisions of the grant being that the people who accept, the carriers that accept it, cannot engage in involuntary furloughs through October 1st of 2020. It doesn't mean they can't engage in other types of bargaining to offset the shrinkage of capacity, which would be leaves or early outs or buddy sharing, job sharing, part-time work. But it does mean that they have to keep everyone on the payroll through October 1st, 2020, no involuntary furloughs. The bigger problem with this pandemic is that the timing of the return to normalcy is uncertain. It's estimated by most analysts that we will recover. The airlines will begin to see demand return once the pandemic has passed. Again, it's anybody's guess as to when that will occur, but The good news is politicians and other folks, health officials, are starting to talk about some type of return this summer. It's unsure when that will be. But at the end of the day, airlines are most concerned that in October, when these grants run out, that they'll be approximately 20 to 30% smaller than they were, say, in February of this year. The timeline to get back to the full normal level of operations is about 2 to 4 years. That's taking just a guess. Nobody knows. And if anybody says they know, they don't know, because we've never been through anything like this. But the estimate is 2 to 4 years to get back to anywhere near normal operations and demand. It also means that airlines might need another bailout to survive come October. If things don't look good and the airlines are actually not reporting that they can develop any kind of level of operations above 50% or 60%, they may need another bailout to survive, and that means to avoid bankruptcy. The problem that I see with Section 6 and the position that we're in with voting on a TA at this point is that there really isn't any bargaining leverage right now until the industry recovers, and that could be anywhere from, again, 2 to 4 years. There will be pressure, I believe, in this very trying time for voluntary concessions over the next 6 months, and that would be to try and line up companies for what they expect the demand to be and the operations to look like, say, post-September, getting us into the fourth quarter and the first quarter of next year. And again, no one knows, but airlines would like to have at least some measure of relief, whatever that is, in terms of leaves, early outs, concessions through the next year and a half or so that they can continue to operate in this uncertain time. So it's a really horrible time to be bargaining Section 6. It's probably a good time to be buttoning down the victory or whatever you guys can see in terms of your TA, and live to fight another day with what you've got, because the chances of being able to bargain a better deal than this TA, whatever the problems that you guys see in it, are very limited, especially over the near term, 1 or 2 years. So that's my message to you, is that there's no normal right now, and we've lost our leverage. So unfortunately, the airline business is on its knees, and we're part of that business. And we're going to suffer at some point in the near future if we don't respond to the company with either early outs or leaves or some other types of concessions to address the size of the operation, which is going to be smaller in the next 6 to 9 months. So with that, I'll turn it back. I'm sorry to bring the bad news, but we all are kind of aware of it. I don't think it's any secret of the problems we're facing over the next year or so. Thank you.
Joe?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. My name's Joe Burns. I'm the Director of Collective Bargaining at AFA. I'm a staff attorney as well, or an attorney as well. I've been doing bargaining at AFA for 20 years and have worked on most of the contracts in the industry: United, American, Hawaiian, Alaska, anyway, just down the list. And I've also been involved, I oversee the bargaining at AFA, and I've worked on a lot of the regional contracts and our strategy for bargaining. And we're going to get into, I'm going to keep this relatively brief because we want to get into the details of the tentative agreement. I did want to just follow up a little bit on what Dan said and put things into context. Over the last number of years, we've had a major push on our bargaining at regional carriers, understanding that one of the things that employers have been able to do over the years is to pit the regionals against each other, and basically make folks compete for jobs, drag out the bargaining, and use a variety of tactics to keep regional wages and work conditions lower than they should be. So what we've done is we've really focused on, with the regional carriers, trying to avoid allowing employers to drag out negotiations for years. We've gone in with targeted bargaining at quite a number of carriers, where we've gone in there, we figured out what the main priorities of the flight attendants are, and we've gone in there and really kind of pushed the flight attendant agenda. And we've been able to get to tentative agreements rather than have negotiations drag on for 3 years or more, which companies like, to get to agreements, hopefully within a year after the amendable date. That's certainly the approach that your negotiating committee took here with this contract. They took a very targeted approach to win improvements. I think you'll see it when you go through the agreement. And we've been able in the last years to close out a lot of agreements, so PSA, Endeavor, a lot of the regionals. And what we're seeing is we're starting to get improvements. You all are already situated where you had some of the provisions that other regionals don't have. You had one of the better provisions in your agreement, but we're also seeing some folks being able to get some rigs at other carriers that they hadn't had. More recently, in the last couple months, we've been, increasingly concerned for the reasons that Dan stated about what the bargaining situation is. And we have really worked hard to lock in agreements at a number of carriers where we were close enough to reach settlement. I think, as Kimberly's indicated, you got the main bulk of your agreement done before this whole crisis really intensified. So in a sense, this is really a tentative agreement that's, pre-crisis or pre-recession bargaining. So that's obviously a better situation to be in. We've had a number of other carriers. Hawaiian Airlines, I've spent the last number of months assisting in closing out those negotiations. We had a very contentious negotiations. But we were able in the last month to bring that to a conclusion where we were really racing against the clock. We had we presented it to the Master Executive Council like hours before they shut down or imposed a quarantine on the state, and they really almost basically shut down the operations. Like this TA, we were able to get a TA there that had a lot of improvements in it. But I think the recognition of both the leadership at Hawaiian Airlines and the flight attendants was that it was very important to lock in the gains that we had done. And likewise, Endeavor flight attendants just overwhelmingly ratified their last tentative agreement in the last month, as well as Norwegian and others. So basically the message is what we've been trying to do is, get improvements where we can get them. And the fundamental, there's really two reasons to that. One is that flight attendants need improvements now in your contracts, especially given the times that we're heading into. The second reason, though, is I think we really see that it's good to have your contract and your security in place, because we believe in the coming months that for folks who've been around the industry a while, as we got the government bailout, which is going to kind of hold things off for a while, but we've already had carriers kind of trying to approach us and wanting us to give concessions. And our position is like crystal clear that this is not a problem that's going to be resolved through concessions, and it's really a demand problem, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to stop. So to the extent that you have a closed out contract, it's obviously harder for the company to come in and start demanding to take things away because you have a closed contract, and really, unless you're in bankruptcy, there's no real leverage. It's a voluntary thing, anything you would do at that point. So that's kind of the second thing. And I think the third, sort of overall thought process is what Dan hit on is most of our negotiations now have stalled out, the ones where we were not able to reach tentative agreements before the crisis. So if you look at negotiations, Piedmont, Air Wisconsin, the other regionals, some of the major carriers, United's not started up, but Americans was on ongoing negotiations. All of that's on pause for now. I'm not sure when they're going to restart. I mean, it's probably going to be a number of months, and we'll get back to the table at them. But it's going to be a fundamentally different world in terms of bargaining. And it's really unfortunate because we were in a period where we were making a lot of gains, especially for regional carriers. And we're just going to have to fight it out at those carriers to get what the flight attendants deserve. But anyway, I'm gonna pass it back to Kimberly to go through and the folks to go through the rest of the proposal. I will say I've had a little bit of involvement. I came out to some of the sessions, as I do towards the end, with your team, and I've reviewed the provisions, compared it to kind of what we have in other contracts and what we got. And even though I think our initial presentations from Dan and myself are talking about some of the difficulties that we face as an industry right now and as our flight attendant union, I will say, having reviewed the tentative agreement and what you're going to go over, this is really a pre-recessionary or pre-crisis tentative agreement, which is good for you all because it actually has what appears to me to be quite a number of improvements in it, which is always a good thing. So anyway, at this point, I'm going to pass it back to Kimberly, and I'll be on the call. And if we have questions later, we can go over them.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So we're going to go over the tentative agreement. Lisa, do you want to make an announcement about questioning, correct?
Yes, I just wanted to let everyone know that the first Q&A session will be tomorrow starting at 12:30, and we will be putting a link up on our website, afahorizon.org, where you will be able to submit your questions. So we'll also link that to our HZN AFA Facebook page. So later this afternoon, there will be an area for you to submit your questions, and we will start to cover off on those questions starting tomorrow at our session at 12:30. Thanks, Kimberly.
Sure. Okay, so here we go. So Article 1, recognition scope. There was one change in this, which is a card check agreement. Card check agreement is where you can get union representation without an election just by showing that more than half the flight attendants have signed authorization cards for AFA to be their exclusive representative. This is language we took from Alaska. And so if Horizon buys another airline, and I realize that is not really the most likely situation right now, and they don't merge it with us, again, another unlikely thing, but that we will be their representative if we collect a majority of cards. This is good because it also requires both Horizon and the other airline to remain neutral. So basically what the point of this is so that if Horizon goes out and decides to buy another airline, in order to say that they can run an airline cheaper without a union, that this kind of prevents that and protects us on this side, because if they're a union, then they're going to end up with a similar contract to us, and it's not going to save Horizon money after all. All right, Lisa, you want to talk about definitions?
Okay, so we have a couple of definitions that we have amended in the contract. First of all, we have our registered commuter. And just the definition part of it, I don't know if you're following along in the TA, but the registered commuter will mean a flight attendant permanent residence is out of the metropolitan area of his or her domicile and who commutes domicile by air and who enrolls him or himself or herself with the in-flight department as a registered commuter. I'm not going to read each of these, but that one was one I wanted to make sure we covered off as far as definition is concerned. Your other one that we have is a part-time flight attendant, and since we now have reduced time and part-time, we wanted to designate that a part-time flight attendant is only used for determining eligibility for your accrual. So everybody understands that's what part-time is now, and reduced credit is what we have known as part-time. The other one is the registered commuter city, and probably the biggest takeaway in this one is to make sure that you are using the address that is in PeopleSoft, as that is what they will use for your commuter information. Kimberly, did I forget anything in there?
Nope, I think you got it. Just so the part-time flight attendant, the differences between benefit status versus type of line you're holding. So reduced credit is the line and part-time is your benefit status. That's the only difference. There's not a change. It's just that it was confusing to have part-time refer to two different things. All right, compensation. Lisa, well, let me start with this. So our philosophy obviously was to get as much money for you guys as possible, understanding that we are working within the confines of a capacity purchase agreement. And just for those of you who are new who may not know what that means Alaska basically pays us a certain amount of money per block hour. So we're not in charge of selling tickets anymore. We're not responsible for loads. It's all on them. And we just deliver the finished product of, being able to take passengers from point A to point B. So there is some interplay with per diem, which you'll see when we get to year 2, why there's no pay increase in year 2, but there's a big per diem jump. So we go back and forth on which is better for a flight attendant, pay scales or per diem. My bias personally is pay scale because it goes into your 401k, it goes into your PBP. All your premium pay is based off the pay scale. On the other hand, per diem is paid on every hour you're away from base. It's not taxed. And it's kind of up to you whether or not you actually spend it on your expenses or not. So the company, I will say that now and in next year, you have far and away the highest per diem in the regional industry. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but that's what we're kind of playing these two things together and how they come together. So Lisa, you want to go into the pay scales here?
Sure. I think a couple of the things that Kimberly just said are really important that you'll see being top of the industry in the regional airline industry. And then I would just want to reiterate the no increase in year 2 was due to that per diem increase. You will note that the first year increase for flight attendants in the first 6 months and in the first year is at a lower percent than all other years. And the process that went into that is with flight path or pathways program. Sorry, I used the wrong term there, but with our pathways program, we are seeing a record number of newer flight attendants make that transition over to Alaska. And our turnover rate is the highest at that first 6 months and first year. So once they get to year 2, then they see that bigger increase. But we wanted to try and make it equitable for everyone, keeping in mind that those levels are the ones that turn over the highest.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear too, because we've had a couple people ask, where it says first year on here, that doesn't mean first year of the contract, that means first year as a flight attendant. And I think that we could have probably spelled that out a little better with first 6 months and second 6 months, as is in the contract. So I apologize if there was any confusion.
And then the last point I think that we'll make on this slide, the previous one that will go forward, is as you always hear from us, that we, and from the company, from management, that we must remain competitive, although we do want to be top of scale. So we do believe we do the best in the regional industry, and we are the best attendants, and we deserve all of those things that go along with that. There is still a component that we do have to remain competitive from the company side for what will allow us to increases. So go ahead, Kimberly, and go to the next slide. All right, so starting at year 25, you will see that there's an additional $1 per credit hour. That's new for us. That's a longevity increase, and that will be effective on 10/1/2020. Kimberly, I'm sorry, 10/1/2021.
No, that should say 10/1/2020.
All right. And you will, those people who are in the 25 plus will also, I believe, see that in the retro pay. Is that correct, Kimberly? I just want to make sure I have that right.
Well, right, because when we get to the implementation, we'll talk about how the pay scales are going to go into effect in October, but you won't see it reflected in your paycheck until January. And then in May, you'll get a lump sum for the increase, the difference between current pay and new pay from October 1st to the end of December. So for that whole quarter, 3 months, you'll get in May. And this is one of those issues where the company, this is an implementation issue. When we negotiated the contract, we intended it all to start on data signing, which would be May 1st. But this is, again, one of those things where I'm sure you've heard a million times the company needs to conserve cash. This is actually true, something we're hearing at all carriers. So while it's true they need to conserve cash, they wanted to not actually pay you this until after January. So we were able to at least lock it into starting in October, even though you may not get the check. If you do leave between October and when it would pay out in May 1st, you will get that check in your final paycheck. So no one's going to lose it, whether they leave between now and May or not. Okay, so this is a chart that Teresa O'Donnell, who's our international research assistant, created for us. And the way to look at this chart is, you can see this. So let's take a flight attendant who's at year 2. She's currently making $23.50. Data signing, which is actually October 1st for the pay, will go to $24.62. Then say her anniversary date is April. In April, she'll go to $26.38. Then next May, because the next pay increase will be May, we don't have to wait till the next October, she'll go to $26.38. Then on her anniversary date in April, she goes to $28.17. And then the following May, so this is May 2022, she goes to $28.73. And then in April to $29.93. May of 23, she goes to $30.45. And then in April of 24, she goes to $32.01. So this will give her overall a 36.2 increase over the time of the contract. And you can kind of do your own, sorry, I'm pointing with my finger. Let me point with the cursor. You can do your own and figure out where you'll end up and where you start. So this is what the pay scales actually look like. So again, if you are in year 2, you're starting at $23.50. By the end of the contract, you're at $33.02, which again is the 36.2%. Obviously, these numbers go down a little bit once you get, well, quite a bit when you get to year 20 or year 19, because at that point, once you hit year 20, you're not getting annual increases. I'm sorry, you're not getting 2 raises a year. You're just getting 1 raise a year. So you can see where that hits right about here, where they're still getting 2 raises a year. What's not on here is that people at year 25 will be making on data signing October $44.28 and ending at $45.92 because they get that extra dollar for the longevity raise. And so reserve pay, you'll see when we get to the new reserve section how this all plays together. But the reserves are actually going to be making more money under this contract, although they're certainly going to be having differences in how they're scheduled as well. So their guarantee goes up to 75 hours a month. You'll see in Article 5, they're also going to get an extra day off per month. So they'll have, the same number. They'll make more money for working fewer days, but they may be working harder on those days, depends how you look at it. The show no-go pay is when you get called out to the airport and you don't fly. It's currently 2 credits, that will go to 3. And all this will start when there's a new reserve system, which is a significant programming undertaking, which is why it says April 2021. So until then, the current reserve system and the current reserve guarantee and pays will stay in effect. Lisa, you want to talk about these?
Sorry, had to unmute myself there. And when I do that, my little sounds on my computer are going to come back. So sorry about that. All right, so we are talking about the Instructor annual override. And let me move my screen here. So they're changing a little bit to getting a daily override. And it will be $16 per block hour, or it will be the $60 per day for classroom. So $16 per hour for IOEs and check rides, and for classroom training, it's $60 per day. Also, for flight attendants who pick up overtime at straight time, you will get the premium pay if premium pay is later offered on trips that are covering those same days. So if you pick up a trip that's a 1-day trip and later in the time, in the following days, they start to offer premium pay for that day, then you will get premium pay for that day trip that you had picked up. We're adding 2 more holidays, Memorial Day and Veterans Day. And then we also have included now a 1-hour pay and credit for alcohol and drug testing, which before there was no pay associated with that.
Hey guys, sorry. You know what? Lisa just reminded me on text. It's not October 1st. The pay starts September 1st. That was the last thing, our implementation agreement that we got them back one more month. So everything I said October should be September. Sorry.
Thanks, Kimberly, and we'll make the change on the slide.
We will. Yeah, I think some of this was created before that last thing. All right, Lisa, ground holding?
Yes, ground holding pay. So you will receive $15 per hour above your trip value and above guarantee for any of the ground holding time that goes over 30 minutes. You won't be able to double dip with the block pay and the rigs, but we will get ground holding pay. And I think it's important to note, I believe we're the only regional, Kimberly, that has ground holding pay now. Is that correct? Or is there one other?
SkyWest has it. In fact, we basically have the same provision now that SkyWest has, but they're the only other one that has it.
So this is pretty record setting, and it definitely was record setting at AFA, being the first regional carrier to have it at AFA. All right, pre-boarding pay. So line holders now could be requested, but not required to pre-board a flight. I think you've seen that this has started to happen some out on the line. It was happening definitely before the COVID-19 pandemic. So you may be requested, but not required to pre-board a flight that you're not working or that you may be deadheading or may not be deadheading on. You'll be paid and credited with 0.5 hours. And this does include a reserve who has picked up a trip. It does not include airport reserve, although they may be required to do so. There's no additional compensation. So that is an improvement for pre-boarding those flights, although I'm not sure how much this is happening right now. It will definitely come back into play when we're back in business with more flights and more bookings.
And I just want to add, I know that we fought very hard, and one of your number one priorities was to get pay basically from, depending on how you looked at it, either when the first passenger scans on or when they get on the aircraft. I will say that nobody in the industry has that pay. There's a misconception that Alaska has it. They absolutely do not. And I know that because I'm their staff attorney as well. So we did open on that, and we actually kept that on the table for a very long time. And the company just wasn't having any part of it. But please don't think that we didn't hear you or that we don't agree, but we just were not able to obtain that. All right, Lisa, you want to take us home on per diem?
All right, so per diem, we were able in the implementation agreement with the other things that the management had requested of us, we were able to keep this per diem effective starting May 1st. It will go up to $210, and then on May 1st of 2021, you'll see that that goes up to $225. And again, just a reminder that we had that 2021 piece because there was no pay increase in 2021. And we felt that that was important that kick in at that time frame. So that was a big fight as well. That does mean that the crew meals and the vending machines and catering orders will be eliminated. You will still be able to eat your fresh meals on the E-175 and the snacks on both aircraft. And remember that during the COVID-19, these don't apply. You're able to eat the food and take things that you need to take as defined in that COVID-19 plan.
Okay, yeah, and I just want to say that up until the very end, the company only wanted to give us $210 per diem for the life of the contract, and not even starting that right away. And I know it's nice to have the vending machines, but I also know that a lot of people, they're often empty, they're broken. We honestly didn't think this was as big as a loss as it sounds like, because people were not necessarily eating them anyway.
All right, hotels. I think this is me again. So we did incorporate what we have been using historically, what our hotel committee has been using as minimum standards and some practices that they've had in play but have not been in the TA. So we were able to get that minimum standards checklist in. We were also able to get an increase in the day room usage for sits that are over 4 hours, scheduled or unscheduled and out of base, and transportation within 25 minutes, which it's currently 30. So the hotel side letter, I believe, is attached to the, actually, it may not be attached to the back of the TA, but we can put that hotel side letter on the website if people are interested in seeing that.
It is. It's in the TA.
Perfect. So that is in there, so you can review it. I think it was important to note that our hotel committee had a large say in what went in there. So our MEC chair has years of experience in that position and was able to really include some things that were important for us around safety. We learned a lot of lessons in Santa Rosa with the fire, and a lot of those things were incorporated into that new minimum standards. And we also will see improvements in that standards checklist if the pilots are able to see any improvements in theirs. So we are tied in just a little bit to them if they get some improvements to that standards checklist.
Yeah, so let's call her out by name. Thank you, Jane Casey, for all your help on that. If you're on this call, I don't know. Or if you play the recording, thank you. All right, parking, Lisa.
All right, so now you will be able to elect to forego the parking being paid where you are receiving your parking and be paid an extra $36 per month. The $36 number was reached by taking all of the costs of parking at each of the bases and averaging that out. So the average was $36 per month, and that is the amount that you will be able to receive if you decide to waive parking in the airports.
All right, hours of service. So I want to give a little bit of history here. Obviously, when the pilot FAR, the 117s, came into effect, we were still operating under the 117s. And so the duty table and all those rules and the FAP, flight duty, FDP, all that applied to us. When we did commit to compete, one of the things that one of the changes we made was switching to the flight attendant FARs, which obviously gives the company more flexibility, but to be perfectly honest, a lot of our flight attendants had been asking for it for some time as well, so that they could fly more than 30 and 7 and so forth, and fly more than 100 hours in a month or 1,000 hours in a year, which you were barred from doing when we were under the pilot FARs. Some of those limitations went away, but then they got new ones with the 117s. But anyway, we switched away from that. And we went, but one of the protections that we kept was to maintain the duty period, the duty table, which is based on the number of legs and what time you report, how long your duty period can be, and then add a cap that you could not be rescheduled more than 90 minutes over that, unless it would have been 14 hours to begin with, which we didn't have any anything that met the 14-hour days of flying anyway. So we decided to go ahead. The company is one of their number one priorities. We were getting feedback from people on both sides, whether they wanted a 12-hour duty day or whether they wanted to stay on the table. Ultimately, we decided to go away from the table, but to build in some other protections. So once this goes into effect, they'll be able to schedule you up to 12 hours. And that includes any rescheduling that occurs prior to check-in, rescheduled to 14 hours after check-in, with the caveat, which is in the current contract, that it's a maximum of 16 hours if the last 2 hours is just deadheading to a place of rest. And we have a current side letter which we incorporated that the flight attendant can agree. She isn't required, but she can agree to work that flight to the place of rest and then get double time for any hours over 14. So that's where we are. One of the things in the implementation agreement that the company has agreed to is to co-pair us with the pilots through December at least, which means not only no mixed pairings during that time, because obviously the flight attendant or the pilots are stuck on or assigned to an aircraft, but it also means that we're effectively in the duty table for the way the trips are built. It may be different on the rescheduling side, but at least the way the trips are built are still going to be under the table because of that co-pairing. So you're not going to see any trips built with 14 or 12-hour duty periods unless that was already permitted under the table for the next several months. So reserve days off, we talked about this. They're going to go to 12 and 13. So 12 in a 30-day month and 13 in a 31-day month. So because the reserve guarantee will go to 75, over 18 days of work, because it's the same number of days of work no matter how many days are in the month, the value of the reserve day goes up to 4.17 from 3.76. So that will start in April or when the new system gets programmed. Duty period limitations, we currently can be scheduled 8 legs, 7 working. That has been taken down to 6 with 5 working. So 6 legs, but only 5 can be working. So at least one of those 6 legs has to be a deadhead if they're going to go 6 legs. We don't see many of those today, and we don't foresee too much change in that, but just in case, we have limited what can be done. And this was part of agreeing to go to the 12-hour duty period, because we did not want a 12-hour duty period with 8 legs in it, obviously. Golden days, we have increased from 6 to 8 per year, and currently you can only use them in 2 or 3 day blocks. We've added that to 4. I do want to say we pushed really hard to have them in 1 day blocks, because sometimes you just want that 1 extra day off before your vacation, or you just need 1 day off to go to someone's graduation. I really can't tell you why, but the company was adamantly against that. I don't know. So currently, blackout days, the days you can't use golden days, are the day of any SAP holiday as well as the day before and after it. So remember, Mother's Day is a SAP holiday. There were several days in there that were not paid holidays. So now it will only be the paid holidays and the day before and after them. So Mother's Day is no longer, for example, because it's not a paid holiday, golden day, blackout day. All right, crew scheduling. Lisa, let's talk about SAP.
Okay, so I'm sure it's no surprise to everyone that management wanted to eliminate it entirely again. And we were able to continue our argument that SAP is something that our flight attendants feel very strongly about, and that if it went away entirely, that would be an enormous problem. So what we were able to achieve is an increased change from 4 hours to 5 hours. I'll explain a little bit what this means. Previously, we had the 4 hour you could drop. So a long time ago, if people remember back, we used to have day trips that were built at exactly 4 hours, and you could drop a single day trip that was 4 hours, not 402. And then what started to happen was when that went through, they changed so that all of the trips had a greater than 4 credit value on your line. So you weren't able to drop those day trips any longer. So now what you will be able to do is drop within 5 hours, and it's actually, you'll be able to trade. So if you have a 2-day trip that is at the 2-day credit, and you want to pick up a day trip and get rid of that 2-day trip, you will be able to do that as long as it is within the 5 hours of time that you're dropping. So it's not a 100% drop and be rid of something. It is being able to trade and rework your schedule and eliminate up to 5 hours of that original line value. I'm sure we'll have questions around that in the Q&A, and we can go into specifics on it, but I think that gives you the general understanding of what you'll be able to do now. We also were able to eliminate the blackout days on the first days of the bid. And I know that was a really big one that flight attendants were having issues with. And honestly, in the world of PBS, didn't really make sense any longer, but they were pretty steadfast that they wanted to keep that. And towards the end, we were able to get those eliminated on the first 3 days of the bid. The only paid holidays are SAP blackout days. So I think that takes care of some issues that people were having with some of those paid holidays and the SAP blackout days and that conflict as well.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about rescheduling. This is scheduling that applies after you've checked in for the trip, and this is where they can take you to 14 hours, except that they have to reschedule you within the footprint of the original trip. I should say of, not or, original trip. So right now they only have to reschedule you on the same calendar days. So if you have a 3-day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday that starts at 2 p.m. on Monday and releases at 8 a.m. on Wednesday, they could give you anything in those 72 hours. So we have limited this to, it can't start any earlier than it was supposed to report, which should be good for commuters. And it can only go up to 2 hours later than the original release time. So that is actually a significant improvement. Now, trip cancellations, this has been kind of the one thing that was keeping us from really having essentially a line guarantee, which was that prior to this, if you were canceled under more than 24 hours, you were just, you got days off, and maybe you got 4 credits, but you were not guaranteed the value of the trip. So what we've put into the contract is basically what Dee Dee has been doing with the AV days, but spelling it out a little bit more clearly, and then she won't have the opportunity to change that as she wishes. So if you are canceled under 24 hours, you're going to be rescheduled as if you had been as if you'd been rescheduled after check-in, which just means they can reschedule you to a trip within the footprint. They can put you on reserve, or they can release you with, if your choice, or they can release you with pay if they don't have anything to give you and they don't want to put you on reserve, which they don't really do. If it's canceled more than 24 hours out, if they have a trip, they will immediately reschedule you to that trip. If not, you're going to get the AV days, and this is what you're seeing now with all the cuts in the flying. And they can add the flying on the AV days up to 24 hours before. So if you fly, you're going to get paid the greater of the new original trip, so you will never lose money as long as you are willing to take the AV day. You also have the right to drop the AV day, but without pay protection, but it's not considered a day off. So you can pick up and so forth, but since it's not a day off, you can't be drafted on that day. And it will not count as one of your minimum days, is the other big piece of that. And then if you get an AV day but you're not flown, or they don't have any flying because there's just not enough flying, or whatever reason they don't give you a trip, then you still get the pay protected for the trip. So this basically completes what we have been trying to get for the past 10 to 12 years, which is essentially a line guarantee, that if you have a trip on your line, you are going to be paid for that trip, or at least, and possibly more, but never less than those trips on your line, as long as you don't self-adjust your line on your own, of course. All right, JetBridge trades. This is a new thing, and I think it's going to be a really nice thing for many of you, especially for commuters. So currently, we can trade with another flight attendant up to 2 hours before check-in. So this says 3. It has to be under 3. So that means it can even be down to an hour before. But if it's between 3 and 1, it will be granted. If both of you are already in the metro area, not necessarily in the airport, but say you're both in Portland, one of you is, at the airport and one's on the train coming in, that will still be fine. And if it's under 1 hour, then scheduling will process it if they have time, but we're not going to force them to, because if they're in a mess, they're not going to have time to do that, and that's okay. So where this differs from trading with another flight attendant is that you could do this in any station. It doesn't have to be a domicile. So you can, you can be in Eugene. Say you live in Eugene, you want to get off and go home, and then another flight attendant is commuting from Eugene to Seattle. She can get on the flight, and that works out for everybody. You just can't do that until it's at least 3 hours before the flight. You can't do it far in advance like you could another trade, because Eugene's not a domicile. So you're splitting a trip, but not in a domicile. So it has to be under 3 hours so that scheduling knows you're both there, because they don't obviously have reserves in Eugene for you to pick up the trip and carry it on if you get off and she doesn't show up. All right, so this is a big one. Open time trades will be based on the number of duty periods, not the number of calendar days. So we've all seen those trips that, land at 12 or release at 12:10, right? And you want to go trade those with open time, that's suddenly a 2-day trip because it spans 2 calendar days. The logic behind that is that because of reserve coverage, the reserve days are based on calendar days. So they would technically need 2 reserves to cover that if it was so, which is fine if a reserve, they don't want to waste a reserve for 10 minutes because they're only going to give you, then what are you going to get when you're sitting on call from midnight until 5 a.m. when the flights start going again, right? So this will allow you to trade that based on the actual, how long the trip actually is to a flight attendant, not to Ames. But that's going to take a while to program, so that's not going to go into effect for some time. The other piece is anyone who's picked up open time or put themselves on will call, will fly, or is drafted will not be extended. So you know when you pick up an open time trip that you're going to get home. I mean, obviously not talking about mechanicals or some other reasons, but when you get back to your base, they're not going to send you out. You're going home. All right, and I am going to have our guest speaker, Lexi, from our PBS committee. I'm trying to unmute her here. Talk to you about the PBS piece because she can do that much more nicely than I can. All right, Lexi, you ready?
Hi, yeah, Lexi Massey from the PBS committee.
Or did I call you Lexi Graham? I'm sorry.
Okay, that works.
All right.
So the only thing that really changed with PBS is related to the credit windows. And you may have seen in one of the FAQs we sent out this last week that we were recommending flight attendants do not bid minimum credit window. And that was because the way the contract language is currently, when the company sets average really low, it makes the credit window so small that you really shouldn't be bidding into it. It can do harm to the flight attendants. And so we were able to correct that in the TA. And all that changes is that the minimum and maximum credit windows become static. So the minimum window, if you wanted to bid for a low timeline, the minimum window will always be from 69.18 to 76. And the maximum window will, if you want a high timeline, is always from 76 to 91. That doesn't change, even though the normal credit window will continue to change.
Okay, thank you, Lexi. Massey. I just want to say Lexi was on our committee. I don't know, how long has it been? I remember you were like 12 when you started. I remember doing road trips with you on your big birthday, but
yeah.
a good egg. Lexi's a good egg. Okay, so another new improvement, if you have a trip posted, if you have it advertised to give away and you're waiting for someone to pick it up, if crew scheduling needs or wants to, they can take that trip and give it to a reserve instead of if there's no trips in open time and they don't want to pay the reserves just to sit. They can do this. They'll do that in seniority order. So that's a nice improvement. And another thing that's
nice.
Oh, who just said that? Who's not muted? Uh-oh. I gotta fix you guys. Sorry. It is nice. You're right. Except now I can't get this. Okay. Sorry guys, hold on a sec. Okay, if you drop your deadhead, you will now be paid for it. You won't lose the pay. So that's a nice improvement too for those of you who, especially if you commute and can get a trip that starts in your commuter city. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cover reserve because this is an all new system, which is probably 95% what Alaska reserve system. Everything basically is different except for the fact that you are there to cover uncovered flying. So there are some pros and cons to this. There is more productivity for the company, but there's also significantly more money for the reserve. I want to, well, I'll get that when we get there. So whether this works for you or not is what it is. It's not going to start until April. I know a lot of you are being thrown onto reserve who may not have been there for several years and thought that that time was over for you. Hopefully by the time this goes into effect in the spring, if you don't want to be a reserve, we'll have gotten some demand back and there'll be more lines. And if you do like reserve and you do like this new system, you can always bid down to it. So reserve lines, there's only going to be AM and PM. There are not going to be any airport lines or CDO lines or any of the other long haul lines, which we never had anyway. So the shifts will be 14 hours and they are going to be the same for all AM, PM reserves in a domicile. That's the same as today. Alaska has set shifts, midnight to 2 p.m. and then 10 a.m. to midnight for the PMs. Ours doesn't work so easily because we don't have as much night flying as they do. So the company will have discretion to build the 14 hours based on the flying in that base. So it may not be the same in every domicile. So like at Alaska, where they have 48 and 7 line building requirement, which means 48 hours off in every 7, the PBS will not build basically more than 5-day blocks, 40 with 2 days off in between, unless you waive that if you want to get all your flying earlier in the month or later in the month. So we are going to have a 2-hour call out in all domiciles. That's actually going to start on May 1st. So we are bringing Medford and Boise and Spokane into the Seattle-Portland world, which is good. The biggest change is that the time on reserve prior to check-in will not count as part of your duty period. So currently, if you start reserve at 5 a.m. and you're not called out till 9 a.m., you've already basically eaten into 4 hours of your maximum duty period. So that goes away. This way, if you start reserve at 5 a.m. and you're called out at 9, your 12-hour duty period can start from 9 o'clock or whenever you would check in. So that is the biggest change in the system and the one that we had the biggest heartache with. But that is actually the way reserve works pretty, as far as I know, Joe can correct me, pretty much at every other carrier that we have. So the assignment must begin within the reserve period. Currently, it also has to finish within the reserve period, so that will also go away. The other big piece that was difficult is that twice a month you can be converted to a 24-hour reserve, which means that instead of a 14-hour shift, you have a 24-hour shift. You will be allowed to enter preferences for which day you prefer to be converted. And if you're converted and not used, you'll get an hour towards your guarantee. So you'll still be able to preference, call me first, call me last, and all that stuff in this reserve world. So airport standby, because it is a line, it goes away. It's not a line anymore, so it goes away, and it's just a regular assignment, just like a trip. Okay, so the big changes here, and these are actually good changes. The longest you can be on airport is 5 hours. It's currently 7, and you will get paid 5 hours for that if you don't fly. You get 0.1 credit for every 6 minutes, which is 1 credit per hour. So it's basically block pay. But that will, once you go fly, it'll factor into that time will count towards your duty period for determining any credit driver for that particular trip. So your maximum scheduled duty day starts when you check in for airport standby. So if you check in at 9 a.m., your 12-hour duty period goes till 9 p.m. It doesn't start from when you were from when the trip is, but from when you check in for airport. You cannot be assigned airport more than 4 times a month. And if you are, you'll get paid time and a half for that duty period. That includes the airport standby. And the premium pay portion, the 50%, is paid above guarantee. All right, so another big change is that reserves will be able to self-assign trips. So they can do that from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Scheduling can pick trips out to assign starting at 2 p.m. Right now it's 24 hours before the trip. So in some cases this will be more, and in some cases this will be less, depending on what time the trip departs. Any morning departure, that will shorten the time that it's not in open time. And then, so crew scheduling basically asks from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock to assign reserves, and any trips that they do not assign have to go back into open time. Currently they can hold them and see what happens. So those will go back in for flight attendants to pick up. So reserve self-assignment, you have to look at how many days you have available, and that's if you have a 1 to 4 day block coming up, and you have to take a trip with the number of days that matches your days of availability. That's because they don't want a 4-day reserve taking a 1-day trip and then not being good for, and then not having any reserves available to take a 4-day trip. You can't split the trips to make them fit. You have to do them within your AM or PM. You can't take it at PM, a 10 o'clock showtime if you're a AM or a 10 p.m. showtime if you're an AM reserve. You can't do that. Not that you probably have too many of those, but can't split the trips. ER reserves may not self-assign. That's because of the 24-hour thing. The company wants to hold on to them and not give them trips. ER reserves are usually the last assigned because they don't use them unless they have to, because they're used for more time. If you have more than 5 or more days of availability, so you have a 5-day block and it's the first day of your block, you can only assign yourself to airport standby because that is a 1-day assignment. And you can't assign yourself to a trip that would break guarantee. So if you're sitting at 74 hours, you're basically not going to be able to self-assign because they want to balance the flying and not have flight attendants breaking guarantee if they don't have to. All right, so here's the big trade-off for all of this, is that if any block hour flown from reserve is paid an additional $250. And I'm going to say that this did also play into our giving no or small raises to first-year flight attendants, because they're going to be getting this $250 a block hour. And now remember, that is block hours, not credit hours. So if you have a time away from base driven trip, so it's being paid on the 4-to-1, the $250 isn't paid on the 4-to-1, it's based on the actual block hours. But that's still going to be a significant amount of money. And reserves cannot be drafted. This is the other trade-off for this. So on their days off, those are actual days off, unless they just want to be picking up trips. If they do pick up a trip, they can be drafted for the rest of that day. It's kind of weird. They can, so if they, get back to base at 3 p.m., they could be drafted sometime that day, but not for their days off. All right, Lisa, why don't you tell us about training?
Okay. So the first thing is that, oh, the slide's different than Article. Sorry, I'm looking at a different thing here.
Article 8, right?
Yep, I was looking, yep. So training pay. Now, it includes all training, not just recurrent and travel days, but it's at 4.5 credit hours instead of 4. So all training, not just the 1 day of recurrent. So this will now include your travel day, will be paid at 4.5 credit. For any trainings between 1 and 4 hours, you'll receive 2 credit hours. And for anything under 1 hour, you will receive 1 credit hour. For any videos that are attached to FAFs, if they're under 5 minutes, they're not paid, but anything 5 minutes or more, actual time will be paid. Kimberly, what is the training pay for the videos?
It's block time. So if you're watching a video attached to an FIAF, if it's under 5 minutes, it's just considered basically like a bulletin and you're not paid. If it's more than 5 minutes, you'll get the actual time. So if the video lasts 10 minutes, you'll get 10 minutes of pay rounded to the nearest quarter hour. So you'll actually get 0.25 credits for that.
Thank you. And then the next slide. Oh, hang on. I need to admit somebody.
I admitted her, whoever it is.
All right. For CBT, which does include videos not attached to your FAIS, there's now a maximum of 8 hours of training. That did change from 9 class hour room hours. Other CBT once per calendar quarter or maximum of 4 times per year. So there will be a total maximum of no more than 10 hours. This will be paid at 1 credit for each 2 hours with a minimum of 1 credit and 50% of the time in excess of an hour. Okay, we covered off on the time will not exceed 8 hours per day, and the company will identify optional portions of training. So the visas and all those other things that are optional, they will identify those. And flight attendants who attend training or do CBT, you can now do those on an LOA. You will receive the same pay as though you're active. You'll just not be considered in active working status. So that's a big difference now. If you are cleared by your doctor to be able to do light duty, before you weren't able to do any of these trainings, you had to wait until you came back 100% fly. This will help save on some of that time. You can stay qualled and do your training while you're on your leave and then come back 100% and hit the ground running.
Right. You also used to have to wait until you came back to get your $100 in pay, but this way you'll get your regular pay at the regular time. All right. Lisa. Okay. So the attendance policy is only changed in the sick leave section. This was a struggle because I have a philosophical, like, why are we putting discipline in our contract, right? And I know many of you share that. But the reality of it is that over the past several years, we have seen management make our attendance policy worse and worse and worse. And because it's policy, there was not exactly that much we could do about it. It's the management right to control their workforce. We tried really hard to go back to the old one, and I think that if anyone has any questions about how hard that was fought, they can talk to Kirk Hansen, because he was the strongest advocate for this on every level. and Marcella Oswald as well. It was a huge thing to get them to put it in the contract, and the only reason we want it in the contract is so that it can't be changed, and so that we have a building block to build on it for next time. And these are huge with a company that, as we know, they use attendance kind of, well, I don't want to editorialize, but every time there's a problem, they think they need to solve it by taking away more of your allowed absences. So we got it in the contract. It's a building block, but it is a really good first step for us. All right, medical examinations. Currently, if the company says you're not fit for duty, they send you to see a company doctor, and the doctor says yep or no. And if they say yes, that you're fit for duty, then you get to either come back to work or continue to work. If they say no, then we have to go through the grievance process, which is super expensive and not always successful, and also not quick. So what this does is this says if the company says you're not fit for duty and their doctor backs that up, then you have the right to get a second opinion from your own doctor. And then if the two doctors disagree, they choose a third doctor whose opinion will be binding. This is what is done at Alaska, and this is what is done at most of our other carriers, and it just streamlines the process and helps the flight attendant hopefully get back to work. If 3 doctors are saying that maybe you're not fit for duty, then maybe not. But if 2 of them say you are, then you should be able to work. All right, vacations, Lisa.
Okay. So we were able to incorporate the side letter that we had previously. And so there are now 2 rounds of bidding, and they are in the contract. The side letter was there for the protection, but they're now incorporated in. And next slide. This is not something that we necessarily saw happening often, but something we were able to protect for, kind of looking into some of the changes that had been being made by management and some of the things they were starting to do. This one will protect that if you are flown into your vacation, you will be paid 3 hours per day. So we wanted to make sure that there was some pay component that would keep them from utilizing that, since they would have to pay for that usage versus current, they wouldn't have to pay you. They could fly you into vacation and not pay you. So we feel like this is a bit of a protection from them starting to do that type of a practice. We don't expect it, but it will give you operationally, if there was an issue, it will give you that pay now.
Yeah, I don't think they intend to start doing this. It's something that seldom happens, but could happen. And if it happens, we want you to be paid for it.
Let's see, within 60 days, AFA and management are going to meet to discuss the vacation slots. So there's been a lot of talk about what's happened with vacation slots. There was some talk about not offering vacation day at a time during our financial issues right now. That's not happening. I want to be very clear, that's not happening. Those are still out there. If the availability is there, you can still get your vacation day at a time. But we were having more and more issues, and we have grievances around the vacation slots and removing those slots at certain points in the year just for their needs and not communicating that to us. So far, we have successfully gotten the slots put back in. We do have a grievance that we won on this. And we also saw that they had reduced the number of slots that were available when we came to bid for vacation this last year. And we want to make sure that we start to protect that, since there isn't anything in the contract currently. We want to make sure that we start to get these things talked about and resolved, and grievances resolved, so that we're all set up for more slots than we had, and everyone has at least choices of slots. And then also that those slots that are out there in the vacation bidding are not removed at some point in time, several months down the road. So at this point, AFA and management will meet within 60 days to start to discuss these grievances and these issues and come to a resolution, so that we will see that and have time to put it into play in programming, whatever those changes may be, and have those ready for the 2021 vacation bidding. I think that covers everything there. Uniforms. I think I have uniforms as well.
You do, because you love uniforms.
Well, and we should thank our uniform committee, Shauna Cox, for working with us as well. Big shout out to Shauna for working really hard with the new uniform launch. And in the midst of that, it was her section that we were negotiating at the table. And I will say, we've forgotten to thank Ed Hawes for all of his work. And he was actually the negotiation committee chair for the bulk of the negotiation sessions. So this was going on at the same time as the uniform launch, and that made it very difficult for Shauna, but she really gave it 100% to work with us to get these things in play. We have increased our uniform replacement bank up to $300 per year, and we now have the ability to use up to $50 of your bank to be reimbursed for uniform compliant shoes. So you may purchase your shoes and keep your receipt, and you will be able to get $50 back for part of that. We also made the list of required items less specific. So this will help if there's ever a transition again. There will be minimum numbers of pieces, and it will just give you more flexibility in being able to pick what you'd like to have versus you're forced into certain things. All right, seniority. So any flight attendant who transfers to a supervisory position at either Alaska or Horizon will accrue seniority for 6 months. This does incorporate a side letter that we had.
Yeah, the contract currently says only to Horizon, so we added in Alaska in the side letter, which was done at some point over the past few years. Lisa, leaves of absence.
Yes, leave of absence. All right, here are where some other things are coming in that we have not had before. So if any of you have been out on a workers' comp injury for more than 6 months, you'll know that you lost your benefits and you had to start paying COBRA. If anyone has done that, you know how expensive that is. And this will allow for you, if you have come back to work for at least 30 days in there, which has happened several times that I know of, and then need to take leave for that same condition, you will be able to continue your insurance again after that 30 days once you've gone back out. So it used to be that it was 6 months for the entire condition, no matter what happened. And this will mean that if you come back, you give it a try for 30 days and need to go back out on that workers' comp, you will be able to continue your benefits. So we think that's really important for people who are out on workers' comps and medical leave of absences.
And just to be clear, that's an additional 6 months. It's not indefinite after you come back. So it's 6 months, then 30 days of work, then 6 months, etc.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And for our moms who have been pregnant while they've been working here, they know that it was an Alaska benefit, I guess, that they had where they were able to extend up to a year after birth. We were not able to have that here. We worked really hard to make sure that we can incorporate that same policy here. So we're really pleased to be able to say that you will now be able to have up to 1 year after birth, including your maternity leave of absence and recuperative leave. So it'll give you a full year, including both of those things, that you will be able to be on leave and bonding with baby. And then for adoptive and foster parents and partners of birth parents, also up to 12 months of personal leave after the adoption, birth, or placement of foster children. And court appearances for job related, you're pay protected if you're subpoenaed. And if it's on a day off, it's 4.5 credit hours. For not job related, you will be released, but it will be considered an attendance event. It will not be pay protected unless it's required by law. So make sure when you're looking at any court appearances that are not job related, that you check the FMLA and state laws to see if those are covered or not, because you definitely want to make sure you let us know if you're not getting that pay if it was required by law.
For example, one of the ones that's required by law, at least in Oregon and Washington, is if you are like either a target or a witness to domestic violence, you're allowed to use your FMLA, and you won't get attendance for that if you have to go testify regarding that situation.
All right, light duty. We do have some more, we spell out what light duty assignments are. Let me see if I can actually get to that section in here. Kimberly.
Oh, do you want me to pull the TA?
Yeah, I was gonna pull
Okay,
up duty.
let me try that. Let's see. It's right here.
I know we've had quite a few people that have been out on light duty, so I think this is a good one to just show.
Okay. You know what? I'm sorry. It's saying screen sharing has stopped, and I don't know how to make it. Oh wait, here we go. Hold on. Oh, oh, here we go. Okay. Can you see that now?
We can see the contract, the TA now.
So let's go to light duty.
This might be useful in our next session to be able to show some of these.
Hold on. This is not the best. Oh, it's showing flight duty. Okay, hold on. We'll get there. Or that. There we go. Nope, that's the pay.
We're close.
It's getting there. We're getting there. Yeah, we're gonna skip right over it. It's right up here though. Okay.
Perfect. So this will give you the ability to kind of see what these new provisions are. The assignment may be made only when the flight attendant meets the skill level necessary for the position and your medical provider certifies that you're able to perform it. It'll be performed in your domicile upon request, and if available, you can perform light duty in any domicile, co-domicile, or the station nearest to your permanent residence that's served by the company. No light duty assignment will expose flight attendant to confidential information regarding your coworkers, so you can't work in the in-flight supervisor's office and work on personnel records. But flight attendants performing light duty will be considered an active working status. You'll have company benefits, and this just really spells out what we had in practice, but wanted to make sure that we had contractually protected.
And that can't be changed, right? Okay. Let's see.
Oh, now we get to flip.
All right, I'm trying to go back to this. Can you see this screen?
We are still on light duty.
Okay.
Let me see what our next provision is, and I can start talking about the next one while you get the screen back on.
Okay.
Actually, I think we're going into
Wait, I got it.
vacation after furlough and recall. There we go. Not vacation.
Okay. But there's no changes to furlough and recall, so there's not much to say there. Other than you should probably review this. Okay, transfers between domiciles. We added a new provision for temporary duty, which is if there's a vacancy of up to 3 bid months. Basically, they will award it to someone from another domicile. You can't bid temporary duty in your own domicile, obviously. And essentially, you move to that domicile for the bid period, and they provide 24/7 per diem and a hotel. And then you would also get positive space travel to your temporary domicile at the beginning of and the end, and then 1 round trip, like if you want to go home for a weekend in between. So this is a nice provision. They're not required to do it, but it should help if there's like short staffing in one base and they've got a class coming on in a couple months, but they don't want to do a permanent transfer for that. Moving expenses, again, no major changes here. Hostage, no changes. And then benefits. Lisa, health insurance, talk to us about that.
All right.
Or actually, talk to us about short-term disability.
Yay! We now have a new short-term disability plan. For flight attendants who've been here for a number of years, you'll remember that we used to have a type of short-term disability, and they rolled that over and took that away and just gave us sick time and PTO, or time off, paid time off. We now have a short-term disability plan that will provide a 40% income replacement. You'll be able to use it after the first, I believe it's 5 days of sick time. That policy will kick in. And then the company and our union offer supplemental benefits for long-term disability. So you will have this short-term disability plan that will take you all the way up to long-term disability. There's no gap between the two of those. So short-term will end and the next day your long-term will begin if you need that. But this will provide protection for those short-term issues more than 5 to 7 days where you're disabled and unable to work and before had to tap into only sick time, this will now provide you with some of that income replacement. You'll be able to, if you choose, use your sick time to get to 100% of your pay. You can also purchase additional coverage, which Alaska has that provision. So for a nominal fee, you will be able to purchase additional coverage as well.
Up to 60% income replacement.
Yeah, 60% is the most that you can get anywhere. So that they cap it at 60%. I suppose out in the world you could buy your own policy, but generally speaking, policies are at 60%. All right, we now have a way to limit the increases, which we have not had before. Again, this is a stepping stone. The way we're viewing it, it's a start to be able to do more in future contracts. But we have never had this limitation before, so we're glad that we have something now that will cap premiums for employees, and it will only, they cannot increase the cost more than these three areas: more than $10 per month, or 15% more than the previous year, or an amount that does not increase the company's percentage share of the premium. Dependent coverage will be at 50% as the premium. So it's the same percent as current, although the dollar amount could change in future years. And deductibles would 20%, no more than 20% more than the previous year.
Management's rights, no changes. Association activities. This is union activities, basically the things that we're allowed to do vis-a-vis the company. They have agreed to give us four company pay days. That's 4.5 credits for union business per bid month. That will come out of their pocket, not out of our dues money. So that's a nice improvement to give us a little more ability to represent you. Dues checkoff, basically this is a new ability for them to payroll deduct if you're past due on your dues. Where this normally comes up is if you've been on leave for more than a few months and you come back to work and you owe money. It can be very difficult to collect that money if people have to write their own checks. So this just will have it come out of your paycheck provided you've signed the deduction card. All right, changes to grievance. And again, hats off to Ed Hawes, who in addition to being our MEC president was our grievance chair for more years than I like to think about. And these changes are from his suggestions and from his experience working with a company. So we currently have a grievance worksheet, which we've had since about 2003 or 7, somewhere in there, which is a step that has to be filed before the grievance. Unfortunately, while that was a great idea at the time, the company has been kind of ignoring them, and it just makes the process that much longer. So instead of that, you'll just go ahead and file a grievance and start that process. We've also updated the procedures for grievance mediation. We started doing that again just in the past year, even though we've been asking them for years to do it, which is basically where you have someone from the National Mediation Board comes in and helps us actually settle grievances, which has been fairly successful, and especially on discipline cases, a nice way to make sure that all sides are heard on that. But the procedures in the contract didn't reflect the way we were doing it, so we just updated them to make sure that they did. And now we also have a process for a panel of arbitrators, which means we've got, we'll come up with 8 names that will hear the arbitrations. And currently we have to pick an arbitrator, get a list from the NMB every single time we have an arbitration, and that just adds more and more time to the process. So this should streamline that as well. No strike, no lockout. This is picketing. It's all about the picketing. So currently our contract language says no picketing. And when we did our event in November, we did the informational leafleting. We would have loved to have pickets. We had a group from another union wanting to carry picket signs on our behalf, and we had to tell them, no, our contract doesn't allow it, and we're not going to end up in court over this with people, owing money. So one of our priorities was to get language in the contract. So we just wanted to strike out picketing from the current language, but they said, no, well, how about we give the Alaska language? So that's what that is. And we know they do informational picketing, and we will be doing it too if we need to. All right, general, this is back to you, Lisa.
All right, so FAAS, this is our flight attendant addiction program, and it creates a pathway for flight attendants who test positive for drugs or alcohol to seek treatment and return to work. It's a tiered program. Alaska has incorporated it, and I want to say that this is thanks to the work that our EAP MEC chair, Lynette Clark, has done with our FADAP program over the years. They've worked very hard to make sure that we start to have some protections for our flight attendants who have substance abuse or other abuse or issues. It covers a myriad of things. It covers gambling and drugs, alcoholism, sex addiction, a number of addictions. And it will allow these flight attendants for drugs and alcohol, which were never protected before in any way. If you tested positive, that was an immediate termination, and it probably would have been very difficult for you to find work in the aviation industry after that. This creates a pathway that will allow you to seek that treatment and come back to your position and have the support that goes along with all of the protection in this program. So it's an enormous program. It's a valuable asset for all of us. The level of alcohol and drug addiction in our industry is very high, and we are finally able to protect those flight attendants, give them the ease of mind to know that they can go into treatment and have their jobs when they return, and have the support of that community available to them each and every day that they continue to fly with us. So this is a fantastic program. Alaska has launched it. We have also incorporated it, and we're just really, really pleased with the work that EAP, FADAP, and Lynette have done along with Alaska's AFA to get this program into place. So we're very thankful to have this program for our flight attendants. Next, the commuter policy. I think I'm talking about commuters as well. So big fight on commuter policy with management, but we do have the start of some protections and some improvements here. You do need to register as a commuter and designate your commuter city, which has to be served by AAG. It does include SkyWest for AAG and its nearest permanent residence. You may list 72 hours out, which it's currently 48 hours. So now you'll be able to list further out. You'll be able to include those SkyWest on those flights. And please remember when you register as a commuter that you will be using your PeopleSoft address. So make sure that whatever address you have in PeopleSoft is the address that you are using as a commuter. So that's a really important piece of it. Sorry for the horns behind me. I've got background noise. All right, so our boarding priority, this will be valid only on Horizon Metal, just like Alaska's is valid only on their metal. Up to 15% of flight attendants on the seniority list will be able to hold this W5 status. You must be a registered commuter. It'll be awarded by seniority, and the number calculated will be annual, but flight attendants may come within that number mid-year through attrition. So if someone leaves and you were next on the list, you may be added during the year. If a domicile closes, you'll be able to have the W5 status if you had it for the remainder of the year, regardless of the cap in your new domicile. And if the closure or displacement occurs in October, November, December, it goes valid for the remainder of the year and the following calendar year. So we did have some protection in case that happened towards the end of the year, that you'd be able to keep that status.
And I just want to make a couple of points here. Commuter boarding priority has been something that has been on our proposal since the contract opener. The company was, for an item that literally cost them $0, completely opposed to it on every level. They said that they didn't want to give it to us because they'd have to give it to us. If they gave it to us, they'd have to give it to mechanics and dispatchers and so forth. People who honestly don't commute the way flight crews do, but that was their theory. And they didn't want to dilute the benefits of pleasure travelers, which does make more sense to me, which we did want to be sensitive to. So where it says up to 15% of the flight attendants on a seniority list, that's not 15% of registered commuters, that's of flight attendants. So 15% of 700 is 105 people, which is about what we have for commuters now anyway. So it shouldn't be a significant effect currently. and that number will be adjusted. So hopefully that won't be too much of an impact. And those of you who may still commute but aren't in that 15% seniority wise, still have the commuter policy. You just don't get the special boarding priority, but you still get all the other benefits of the commuter policy.
And to that part that Kimberly just mentioned, we pulled the commuter list. We had management get the list for us so we could see everyone who was currently on the list, and we did the math ourselves as well. And actually, we kind of, I don't know that we suggested the percentage, but we were very comfortable with the percentage because we had the numbers right there in front of us. We were able to see who's on it currently and have a little cushion there. All right. Kimberly, you want to take the minimum crew lounge amenities?
Oh, sure. Just spelling out what has to be in the crew rooms, and it's like a quiet area, microwave, comfortable furniture, etc. Right now, it's just kind of like whatever they decide, they get to put in there. We also incorporated an instructor side letter, which has to do with when the instructors work and so forth. That's current. We just put it in the contract so that everyone would have access to it. I'm going to send you back to safety, Lisa.
All right, so safety. Pull up my little highlights here. All right, so a flight attendant will be removed from the rest of their trip with no loss of pay or attendance consequence if involved in certain events. So we added that at the flight attendant request, we added that the same provision was for any trips within the following 7 days. So before it was limited on being removed for the trip for only a certain number of things that were in the contract. And now you will be able to remove yourself from the trip for up to 7 days from those types of things. At the flight attendant request, AFA may send an EAP rep to the scene. So we were able to get that protection in there as well. And this has come into play when people are outside of their home and they're on a trip, and they may want someone to be able to fly with them to get them home. So EAP would be able to relocate themselves to where that flight attendant is located and travel back home with them.
All right, duration. So it's a 4-year agreement, which means it will be amendable April 30th, 2024 with an early reopener, which will be October 30th, 2023. So 6 months. We've had that in our past couple contracts as well. We have a few new side letters. One is the implementation agreement. We talked about this a little bit here and there. You can see it. I believe that's in the TA. If it's not, I will check and we will add it to the TA. The general effective day is May 1st, which is the date of signing, if you see that anywhere in the agreement. The new reserve section and the guarantee and the day off, because of the programming, it's expected to be April 1st, but it won't go into effect until AFA signs off on the testing and that we believe it's ready to work. Pay scales, again, that should say September 1st. That's me with an old, my fault. Should say September 1st. Pay increases from September 1st to December 31st will be paid on May 5th. Per diem starts right away, first day of May. And most other economic items are January 1st, 2021. And you will see those in your paychecks immediately in the February paycheck. Well, actually, I guess in your advance on your January check as well. Ratification bonus, $1,500 on January 5th paycheck and another $750 on May 5th. This was originally supposed to be $1,500 on May 5th and then the $750 on next May 5th. This is another one where they pushed us so they could conserve some cash for a few more months, but you will get that check. And if you're on a leave on the day it becomes due, you will get that when you return from your leave. Hotels, Lisa already went to talk about it. It's just an actual side letter with the checkoff list of minimum standards that will be in the contract itself.
We also have, I think, go back 1 second, the expedited arbitration and being able to talk to what hotel issues are going on right away. So we now have some protection that we must be having a conversation about a questionable hotel within a very quick amount of time with them. So these things are not going to go on and on and on, i.e. the Spokane hotel issue. We're going to be able to meet and resolve these issues much more quickly than we have been in the past. So I know hotels isn't necessarily one of the big things that you use to make your decision, but this is something that really was necessary for us to have this protection to be able to resolve hotel issues in a much more timely fashion.
All right, so I want to talk to you from a legal perspective about what happens next. And Dan and Joe both touched on this somewhat, but let's just go through it very basic. I've seen some questions on Facebook about this, and that means that people are talking about it, and there's some misunderstandings about what happens. So if we vote yes, then the contract goes into effect per the implementation schedule, and we all go about our ways until we start negotiating again in 2023. If we vote no, the current contract stays in effect. That's the Railway Labor Act. So you'll still keep getting paid under the contract as it is. We'll take a survey to see what were the issues that prevented ratification. We may file for mediation because it's possible that we would need a mediator for help at this point, and we would start negotiations. Now, normally, we look at the TA and we say, okay, let's fix this. We didn't get enough pay, or they really wanted SAP changed, and these are the issues we're going to push, right? Doesn't mean we're going to get them, but those are the ones we're going to propose. But there's nothing to stop the company from taking all the gains off the table, and even from going backwards from the current agreement. So I just want you to understand that it's not necessarily guaranteed to be better. And even if it does end up better, you have to look at what we call the opportunity cost of that money is. So if it takes 2 years to get an extra 2%, has that saved you any money? Is that really a victory? That's the kind of thing you need to consider. And of course, then we have the issues of concessions and bankruptcy, which Dan did touch on. Now, anytime we have a contract, closed contract, then they have to ask us for concessions, and we have to negotiate, and we can say no. Currently, we're in Section 6. If the contract is voted down, we are not considered to have a closed contract, and they can put whatever they want on the table, and we have to discuss it. Don't have to agree to it, but we have to discuss it. Now, in bankruptcy, which we were able to avoid in September 11th, and hopefully we will be able to continue to avoid, but there are no guarantees. No one knows what is coming. And I hate sounding like a fearmonger because I don't want to be, but I'm just being realistic. It's a bleak couple of years we probably have coming up. But anyway, in bankruptcy, if they ask for concessions, we are required to negotiate, and the court will determine whether we've given enough. And if we don't come to agreement, the court will make its own concessions for us. Okay. So whichever situation you're working from, whether we decide to voluntarily enter negotiations, which is generally done only to avoid bankruptcy, or whether the company is bankrupt, my opinion, I'd rather be working from a contract with higher wages and higher per diem and so forth. So that is something else you should consider. Like, what is going to be the baseline in a new world versus what do you think is what's your opinion, what's your belief, which is hopefully based on logic, not anger, about where this industry is going over the next few months and or years when you make your vote. How you vote, I'm going to just say it, is entirely up to you, and it's a personal choice, and it's your life. But I want you to make an informed vote and not one just based on emotion. That's all I'm asking for you at this point. That being said, both the MEC and the negotiating committee does support a yes vote on this for these reasons, but also because I know we're hearing a lot about, this contract was negotiated mostly prior to COVID, and that is true. And we were going to bring that contract out to you saying we pushed as hard as we could, and this is as far as we could get, and we wanted you to have a chance to vote on it. And whether you wanted to take what we could get at that point or to push it, to wait and hope for more. Okay, so that's where we were at that point. Now I think we're in a different world, and I just want you to think about that and to make a choice that's best for you. Lisa, do you have anything to add to that, or anyone else from the committee? Of course, the rest of you are on mute, so if you want to say something, text me. But Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that puts it really well. We will be doing a question of the day that will talk to some of these specific items a little bit more. And we will be, again, taking your questions, and I'm sure you'll have questions about this and other things, and we'll be talking about those issues specific in the Q&As. So don't feel like this is all that we're going to say about it. We definitely will be talking with you between now and when the vote is finished. And then I'm going to bring Kirk and Joelle up at the end. We finished with everything and see if they have anything to say. We'll unmute them once we're finished and see if they have.
All right, well, Joelle has texted that she doesn't have anything to add, so okay. So let's talk about voting. Lisa, you want to cover this?
Sure. So the polls are going to open on April 20th at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and they will close on April 30th at 9 a.m. Or did you verify at noon Pacific Daylight? I think it's noon.
This is correct. This is correct. I verified it.
Okay. So polls will close at noon Pacific Daylight Time. So from start at 9 on the 20th, and they close on the 30th at noon. Voting will be by phone or online. The ballots are going to be on April 16th, and they should arrive a couple of days after that in your mail. Whatever address you is the address that we have. If you have updated it with the company, we get those updates and they have been forwarded to ship. That may not mean that it is the most current one. There's glitches in the system and we find them every time we have a vote. So please work with Amy if you do have any questions, and membership as well. You need to be a member in good standing, so your dues must be current. If you're on leave, you are able to vote. So don't worry if you're on leave. As long as your dues are still current, you'll be able to vote. If you're not sure of your status, reach out to our MEC Secretary Treasurer, Amy Baird. We've given her number, and you can text any of us or find our contact information on our website. She's also on Facebook. If you don't have a ballot, you don't receive it, we will put this 800 number on our website as well. And the 800 number is 800-424-2401. Again, 800-424-2401. You'll want to press 1 and then enter 706. You'll need to leave a voicemail. The office is closed for COVID-19 reasons. They will be checking that voicemail very, very regularly. So they will get back to you. They'll be getting you a code at that point because there won't be enough time to remail a ballot out to you. You'll get a code that you will be able to use either online or over the phone, and that'll allow you to vote then as well. So biggest important things are your home address. That's where it'll be coming to. It'll be your address that you had on file in PeopleSoft or that you gave to us on your membership application. You do need to be in good standing, so please work with Amy Baird to work out payment arrangements. If you have a past due balance and are unable to pay that all at one time, make sure you're working with her. She will be able to work with our international office to get you on a promissory note that will cover you and get you the ability to vote. And if you do not have a ballot, please contact that 800 number right away so that you will be able to get that new code given out to you.
Okay, there's a couple of things I wanted to add. This is a shorter voting timeline than normal, but we wanted the contract to start May 1st, so we had to have it counted by May 1st, and we set everything up as quickly as we could from when we finally got agreement on all parts of the TA. Secondly, your negotiating committee, your MEC and LEC officers are available to answer questions whenever you have them, and we will be doing, as Lisa mentioned, these online Q&As every day at 12:30, except Saturday we're going to do another one of these presentations, except this Saturday the 18th through the 28th. So I hope that somewhere in there that you'll have time to come and get a question answered, as well as doing our question of the day and our FAQs. We really, really are going to be working hard to make sure that everyone has the information that he or she needs to cast the vote that works for her or him. Is that it? Lisa, anything else?
I think that's everything.
Okay.
We'll be adding a few things that I made notes on just to clarify some of those things that I wanted to get to quickly. So we'll have those pages pulled up for the next presentation. And if you guys want to join in again, the next presentation like this one is going to be on Saturday. We will work to get this on our website as well. Kevin is working to get also the webinar that I did a few weeks ago. He's working to get all of those on a YouTube channel. So don't think that we forgot to do that. We've been working on it. It just ended up being a much more complicated process than we realized when I just popped off and said, yeah, these will all be available for you to look at after. So it takes a little bit of behind the scenes work. I think we're really close to being at the end of that. So these should all be up rather quickly if the others are not up already. But Kevin is working really hard on that. Please go to our website to access any of these documents that you need. They are all on there, including the summary of changes now. I know there was some question about where that was last night, but it is back up again. And continue to text and email each of us if there's a concern or a question, and we'll get that question area onto the website as well so that you can start to submit your questions that you have. So I really want to thank Ed for all of his work. I want to thank the negotiations committee, Tanya and Joelle, and then the MEC, Kirk and Joelle, for all of their hard work. Kimberly, thank you for all of your hard work. And then all of you for giving us your feedback in the survey and all of your feedback, positive and negative, on what we can do better in future TAs and all of the things that are important to you. And I just want to thank everybody for all their hard work. It's not a paid position, it's volunteer, and it's a lot of work for everyone. And we're really happy to represent you, and hopefully we'll continue to do a good job of that.
And thank you all for tuning in to our presentation. I think this is more people than we've ever had at a roadshow, so that's great. All right, so I'm going to.
I just saw a text from Joelle to thank everyone that attended for her council, and also Kirk wanted to thank everyone from his council. So for all of the members, your LECPs are very thankful that you're on here, and your officers from your local councils are all waiting to help you make this decision, the best decision for you. So thanks for all of them that you guys were here as well today.
All right, I'm going to end the recording. We'll figure out how to get it posted so that you can watch it again, or if your friends weren't here, to tell them where to watch it. And thanks. We'll take your questions tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.